I drove 900 miles to buy my dad a gift, a car very important to his childhood, as a thanks for all he does for me. 19 feet and 7.7 liters of pure rolling love seat, a 1969 Cadillac DeVille convertible. Since the first DeVille convertible I bought him as a gift earlier in the year,
Catch!
ended up being 19 feet and 7.1 liters of a hardly rolling, janky piece of Swiss cheese. And after spending many moons tinkering with it, I finally got it to run. And, well, these cars aren't really that easy to come by. I found another 69 convertible, and it was lacking the one good thing the white car had going for it, a running engine. So in this video, we're gonna take the only good thing out of the lousy 69 Caddy I originally bought and put it in this Cadillac. So my dad can at least have one drive with the top down in his new Cadillac before winter. And I wanna get all this done in 10 days. I'll start by pulling the battery out so we can put it in the brown one later. That sounded inappropriate. And now it's time to get down and dirty and get this old boat anchor out of the white car. Tyler and I pulled off the hood, and then I start pulling everything from up top, pulling off the radiator hose, the belts, the power steering, and a bunch of random vacuum lines. Many vacuum lines. All right, so I think I'm good with the whole top end of the motor here. I think I've got everything disconnected that I have to. Power steering's off, belts off, those belts anyway. Oh, I got a few more things on the coil here, and I don't even know if that's part of the carb or what. I gotta take pictures of all these different vacuum tubes before I remove them, because it's a bit of a mess. And unfortunately, there aren't a ton of wiring schematics on the internet for the 1969 Cadillac DeVilles. Strange, right? So I'm tracing wires and lines, labeling what I can, and taking lots of pictures. Then I switched to the brown car, where my brother discovered some water where water shouldn't be. It seems that on the very moist and rainy ride home from New York, much of the water found its way in the doors? Luckily, I'm in the cool and bespoke and elderly Cadillac DeVille owners Facebook group, who taught me there's drains in the bottoms of the doors. Who knew? Yep, this one's got water in it too. But now that we've done some land yacht weight savings, while we're over here, I'm gonna throw the battery in this to see if it's got any sort of life and see if anything works. And much to my surprise... All right, let's see if we've got any sort of power. Oh, we do. Because the hazards I see are on. It's a good sign, I think. Let's grab the, might I say, original Cadillac key, too. Where's the hazards? Oh, that must have been it, but... All right, I'm gonna have to fix that. Let's see if we got windows at least. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. And this one. And the backs. A little slow, but it works. That'll do. And then he said the top button is disconnected right now and they use this, so let's give it a shot. Well, what are you making the face for? That's pretty good. It's not bad though.
It doesn't even stink that.
No. This seemingly minor detail seemed huge to me. Oh, that is cool. Okay, enough fun. Back to the white Caddy. With everything up top disconnected, I think, I'm now getting the Caddy up in the air so I can remove the fuel lines at the pump, the lower radiator hose, some wiring to the starter, and finally, the dust cover on the bell housing. Now's a good time to get the exhaust out of the way. Well, what's left of it anyways, which is always a good time. Catching the falling rust bits in my mouth like little chocolate chips. All right, and the exhaust is... I can't wait till I have a lift. Well, a big lift. With the exhaust out and our dust cover off, we can now access the bolts holding the torque converter to the flex plate. A tedious process by which we spin the flex plate to access all the bolts by way of a screwdriver on each individual tooth on the flex plate. 3 hours and 17 minutes later, all the bolts are out, which leads us back up to the top of the motor to scan and remove all the little details we forgot to disconnect. Only a few more minor details till we get this motor out of here. Day 2 wouldn't be so easy. I start by removing the 6 bolts holding the transmission to the engine. Now it's time to get the motor mount bolts out. As you can see on this side, there's one of them, and then the other one is up there. This has been extremely easy and straightforward this far, but that sucks. I'm thinking I'm gonna have to pull the alternator. I hope I don't have to pull the oil filter housing, but let's see if I can get something in there to loosen that nut. But the alternator, I think, is definitely gonna have to come off for me to get to that one. Turns out this isn't even the alternator, that's the air pump. Slight little brain fart. Now I pull off the actual alternator, followed by the alternator poser. Air pump's out and this shouldn't have to go back in. Now we can finally access the pesky motor mount bolt. But first, I'm gonna climb under and support the transmission with the tranny jack. That's not her name. I remove the motor mount bolt I can, but then I realized to get to the motor mount bolt on the driver's side, we gotta pull the fuel pump off. I thought it could stay on the motor. Luckily it's easy. 2 bolts and it's out. Which means the fierce father could grab the engine leveler as I prep the Caddy for its heart removal procedure. I line up the crane, attach the chains from the leveler to the front and back of the block. Steve stops by to check my mounting points, and with the help of my brother and dad, as much as one can do with a healing broken leg anyways, we start to get the 472 out of the Caddy. I work down below the car, making sure everything's separating seamlessly, while Dad and Ty watch up top and try to wiggle and lift it out. But for some strange reason, this thing wasn't budging. It's not moving out as it should, and it's taking so much longer than it should. This should be easy. But after a half hour of struggling, I found out why. Oh, because there's a bolt.
What?
There's a bolt.
You didn't get a bolt out?
Yeah.
That's why then.
Shocking revelation. Jake's an idiot. Once I wipe away my tears from the rampant rampage of verbal abuse from my family, the motor, as it should, lifts out of the engine bay. Here, the mammoth organ donor lies. The white Caddy, giving its soul to put another 69 Cadillac DeVille back on the road for thousands more miles and memories. The 7.7-liter 472 is out. Now to get the transplant respin off the trailer. Let's hope we don't have a redo of last time when this comes off. You saved the day on that one.
Find out when the brakes don't work.
The brakes do work because the kid was holding them when it went up. First drive. Want me to take the crutches?
You sure it's got brakes? It doesn't matter, I'll just ride it up.
How's it feel?
Oh, it feels great. Got a tiny little steering wheel, huh?
Keys to your chariot. Looking good.
Okay.
Now back to the motor. I'm removing all the expansion plugs in the block so I can completely rinse out the water jacket. As you saw in the last Caddy video, we did this to one of the ports while replacing a plug. Now we get to do it to all of them. And there is a ton of crap coming out of here. Looks like a bad night after Chipotle.
Oh, look at that.
It was pretty fascinating, actually. The sheer amount of junky crud coming out of here. Once I blow all the holes out with air, I remove the flex plate and what I thought to be another freeze plug. And boy, was I wrong. So as it turns out, this thing that we pulled out that I now have covered with tape, and it's actually sitting right here, this is a camshaft plug, not a freeze plug, which wasn't supposed to come out. It's not the end of the world. I just got to find a new one today, and then I'll just have to borrow Steve's tool, press it in. So minor setback. But what Steve also mentioned to do was pull these manifolds off because first and foremost, there's an exhaust leak right there because the gasket's missing. And I'm not sure if the bolt is broke in there or not. And then around this side, this one's been fixed. And so begins what would end up being one of the longest weeks ever. Now I'm numbering and removing the spark plug wires, various brackets, as well as the AC compressor. So this motor's pretty much bare, so I can give it a quick paint job. Then it was time for what's commonly referred to in the automotive world as one of the worst jobs to do ever. Removing the exhaust manifold bolts. A little easier since the motor's out of the car, but nonetheless, I'm trying every trick in the book to make sure these things don't snap. I'm tightening and loosening the bolts back and forth, tapping around them with a hammer to jar up the rust, and using a MAP gas torch to get them nice and hot. And the first two, surprisingly, actually came out. But then...
But the threads are there. It's sticking out in there.
And as the manifold came off, we made a poor discovery.
That one's broke, I think. Oh, like this one. Yep, see, that one's broke. That's still fucking hot. That's sticking out quite a bit. Heat that up good. That one's broken there, isn't it? Yep. These two are both. This one they f***ed with and looked like they tried to drill it. This one's got to be drilled out. That one, let's get some
vice grips. They're right on. So on this side, that one broke off, but I should be able to at least get vice grips on that. This one was broken off, and it's broken off in there. That one's gonna be a little difficult. And this one is the best because it's been broken off in there for gosh knows how long. And it looks like they already tried to drill it out, as you can see by their off-center hole. That one is gonna be a real issue. This one with the exposed stud should be the easiest of them to get out. So we're gonna heat it up again and try to get it out with vice grips. And lo and behold, it didn't work. So we moved to the other manifold to see if we'd have better luck. Still heating, hammering, and trying, but at the end of the day, so far not the best luck with the manifolds. This one broke, this one broke, this one was broken already. Oh, and this one broke. So we have more broken off on this side than not. And I mean, I heated these things up with MAP gas for like 2 minutes a piece. Look, this is a 1969. They were either gonna break or they weren't. So I'll wait for Steve to come home. He's gonna bring home some really nice, real high quality drill bits. The ones that are sticking out like this, I'm gonna try to get to with vice grips. Which I was actually successful with, for one bolt. So in the meantime, we're gonna drag the brown Caddy off the road and begin prepping to paint the engine block. The best way to do this would be, of course, to strip the whole thing down, pull off the carb and everything, and send it off to bake. In my case, I just want to pretty this thing up quickly so I can get it back into the new Caddy so my dad can drive it before winter. So I'm taping everything off, stuffing rags in all the engine's holes, and then hitting it with a wire brush to knock off the old loose paint and rust, before firing up the grinder with a wire wheel and really going to town. She cleans up pretty darn good for a 50-year-old piece of meat. Now I'm spraying it down with some Simple Green, hitting it with the pressure washer, soaping it down once again, and giving it a final rinse. Steve will be over later when he's out of work to give me some direction on the exhaust manifold stud issues. So in the meantime, I'm going to start sanding down the air cleaner cover so I can paint it later on. A while later, he comes over, and we clean the threads in the head for the bolts that did come out, and come up with a game plan for the rest of the broken bolts. And the next morning, I used some drill bits he let me borrow to try to drill out some of the bolts. Careful, Jake, don't break these things. They cost as much as your liver. One I drill most of the way out, but stop because, well, I don't know what to do and haven't done this before. I'd rather wait for professional guidance before I mess up and drill into the head. And on the other side, I'm actually able to drill one out. Well done, you idiot you. These plugs are definitely getting replaced while we're in here, so I'm gonna spray them down with some PB Blaster to see if they will even come out. I'm spraying these things for 2 days, so hopefully they don't break. Please don't break, please don't break. Oh. Oh, I think I got it. I think I got it. Aha. It feels nice to win one. I get lucky with the other 7 plugs, then lightly thread them back into place, because this motor's gonna get primered. One more round of degreasing, since we were spraying PB all over the thing, and now she's ready for a coat of primer. A wild Bob DriveHub Ross appears with his magic paintbrush to lather the engine in some Rust-Oleum rusty metal primer. I got this idea from Uncle Tony's Garage on YouTube, who gave me the idea to use this paint, and I prefer brushing it on in this case, to put it on thicker and really get into the crevices. And speaking of crevices... Yes, good. I'm glad that a bird just shit on the motor as I am literally painting it. You've got to be shitting me. Ugh. Where are you, you mother? Maybe he thought it was a giant rock or something. I could kind of see it, but now she's primered. Motor's painted, most of it. Didn't come out half bad. And then of course, the area where our friend left us a present. Still have to figure out what I'm gonna do with this part and this part. The next day, I'm just taping everything off once again and using the spray version of the rusty metal primer to give the motor another quick coat and get into some areas I might have missed, which is also why the starter's coming off. It'll make putting the engine back in easier anyways. And we're done. The motor is ready for paint. I've got a few more minutes of dry time until it's time for our top coat, which brings us to our next little problem. See, from the factory, this engine was a dark blue, like a pretty dark blue. And no one makes it in stores. No VHD engine paint, none of those spray cans you see are dark blue. They have Ford blue, which is a beautiful blue, might I say, but it just doesn't match. It's too light. You can order it in, POR15 makes it and one other company, but it's like $75 for engine paint, and it takes like a week to get here. And I don't have that kind of time because I'm trying to have this motor in the new car in less than a week. So I think I've come up with a little solution. Rust-Oleum has this, it's called Gloss Royal Blue. Now Royal Blue is usually a lighter blue, but on the can here, it looks pretty darn close to that blue, does it not? And that's the original blue right there. That hasn't been painted or anything, that's original. I've used Rust-Oleum on a ton of projects, because it's inexpensive, readily available, and it's all compatible with each other. Plus, I get really good results with it. I think I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna open it up and make sure that it looks as it does on the can though. But when I opened the can, oh dear, that's just not even close at all. It's not even close to what's on the front. I think I have an idea what I can do. I'm gonna mix a little gloss black in with the royal blue to see if I can darken it down to the Cadillac shade of blue. I open up the blue, open up the black, pour some blue into the can and the floor. Oh boy, how'd I know that was gonna happen? Pour in some black and get pleasantly surprised. It's looking so much better. Look at how much it's darkened it up. That's awesome. Not exactly Cadillac blue, but it's a pretty cool looking color. We won't call it wrong, we'll call it custom. And by the time I'm done mixing my Rust-Oleum cocktail concoction, the primer's all dry, and the engine's ready for its Askew Azure paint job. And I'm trying to paint it just like they did from the factory, which looks like, according to the history books, they painted everything, from the pulleys to the pan. And now the first coat's done, it's time to go get the tool that's gonna make all of this work a complete waste of time. Oh boy, tight turn. I'm going to my uncle's to borrow his real torch, because it's our last hope in getting some of these broken manifold bolts out. Let's not get too heated about this. I wouldn't have painted if I'd known earlier, but getting the broken bolts out is a lot more important in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. This is my first experience with an oxyacetylene torch, if you can't tell, and boy do I feel like a badass. After heating the broken bolt and surrounding area into oblivion, and giving my fresh paint job a good solid baking, I grabbed the vice grips to try to turn it out, but it still wouldn't come out. So we tried again. And finally...
You moving?
I think so, yeah. The whole manifold is
Yeah, well, that's what Paul said, to get it hot. Where's the... Oh, there's one.
I'm trying to see the manifold glowing. Look at that. Holy crap. Jeez.
That's out.
Holy sh**.
Nice. All right.
Look at that thing.
Yep.
Whew.
The other one's gone.
Dad was just so excited to try to get the other ones out, too. There's one more broken with exposed threads on the other side, so I made that one look like the core of the sun, grabbed my vice grips, and then I got even more heated than it. You. The exposed part of the bolt broke off from the rest of the bolt.
Think there's enough to grab?
Probably not.
I heated it up and tried again,
Not enough, right?
but there just wasn't enough exposed bolt left to grab.
No. No? All right, that's it for the dog. Got one out. One, that's it.
Well, the torch is very cool to use, and of the 3 bolts that I was trying to get out with it, I got one out, and absolutely cooked the paint that I just spent all day putting on there, which was kind of... I'm an idiot, but we still gotta get those bolts out. Manifold bolts 1, Jake 0. Luckily, neighbor Steve had just gotten home and came over to give me a hand. He was able to drill another one out, and after learning how to do it correctly, the next day, I was able to drill one out too.
That's gonna be hot. It's actually not that hot. Wow, look at that.
And then, per his directions, I set up my cute little Harbor Freight welder.
Now I have to try to weld this nut to this broken stud here. And I don't know how to weld. So, might as well learn today. I think I did it.
My uncle, whose torches I borrowed, swung by before I turned the nut on the stud I welded on, which promptly fell right off. Guess I'm not that good of a welder. Shocking. But he was able to get that stud out with lots of heating and vice gripping. That's 14 down, 2 more to go. Which are the most difficult ones? Lovely. This one's broken below the surface of the head and at an angle. The 2 worst things you can have on a broken bolt. But I need it out and spend the afternoon punching and drilling and heating, all to no avail. And the worst part is, the more I heat it, the harder the steel becomes, which makes drilling so much more difficult, even with Steve's expensive drill bits.
So I have been messing and messing with this last one, and it's a problem. This little dark area down there is a divot. So it's like a little cave, and the drill bit just wants to keep walking down there, but that's off center. So I'm kind of stumped here. I'll try to show you guys with a little, I'll use this little screwdriver. So see, that area is a divot. This is higher. So the bolt snapped, and it's just, you just can't get a punch in there to punch a hole in the center, and you can't drill it. So I've got Steve researching some ideas on what we can try to do. He had a few ideas he was pondering. But in the meantime, I have some pretty important stuff to do to the brown Cadillac before this motor even goes in, or can even think of going in. Right, so at the brown car here, here's what we gotta do. When they pulled the motor, they left all sorts of stuff in here. The starter, still wired up. The power steering pump is still connected. The coil up there is still connected. And I think that's pretty much it. So I'm at least gonna get this prepared and ready so that when the motor's done and ready, I can put it right in this. Because it's Friday and I'm looking a little off on my timeline.
Those broken manifold bolts have put me back almost an entire week already, and they still aren't out. But this engine bay's got to be prepared and ready so when we do finally get those bolts out and have the motor ready to drop in, it can go right in with no delay. I'm just removing the starter, the power steering pump, and a few other things they left behind that we don't need in here. Then I can start taping things up and covering things so I can spray the whole thing down with Simple Green and then pressure wash it all.
All right, well, the engine bay's in surprisingly good shape. It's pretty much all just this barely surface rust. And I actually didn't want to clean this up too much down here in this frame or subframe, whatever that would be, just because it's got oil on it, and oil's the best protector from rust. So I'm afraid if I clean this up and paint it even, that it'll just end up worse than it would be if I left it like that. And that doesn't look bad, it's just, you know, got a little coating of oil on it.
Now, because it's not too bad in here, I'm just scuffing all the inner fenders and radiator support. Basically every part you see, I'm scuffing down with a light grit scuff pad to smooth them out and get rid of the light surface imperfections. Then I tape off a few more things before moving back to the engine. It's a bit too windy to paint today, so I went and picked up some special punches. This should help me make a divot in the center, even though it's all angled where it's broken off. But it doesn't work, so next we try to take JB Weld putty and fill the rest of the hole where the stud's broken off. Maybe if we can get the drill bit started through the flat JB Weld, it'll just keep eating straight through the bolt too. That needs a few hours to cure before we can try to drill. So in the meantime, I'm gonna prep the motor for its second coat of paint, since I don't think I'll need the torch again. One problem, the paint I used before was my own off the top of the head mixture. No measurements of anything, come on now. No 10 ounces of black to 3.97 hundredths of blue. So I'm doing my best to eyeball the same mixture before lathering the engine in a second coat. But if you couldn't tell, it's a different shade of blue.
This paint still isn't going on the best, but I do really like the little difference in paint. You can see up there it's darker. That's what I haven't painted yet. Actually, here, I'll take the brush so I can show you. This is not the ideal way of painting, but it's just what we're going with for now. You can see how different this blue is, and I really like the darker better. It looks much, much more like the color that I was originally going for.
We're not going for any originality awards with this thing. Plus, I kind of like that the color's completely custom. And now, the engine's finally completely painted, and the JB Weld is completely cured, so I tried drilling the broken bolt out, which doesn't work.
Now that the motor is all painted, it's time to put back in the freeze plugs. Now, Steve brought over this nice freeze plug installation tool, which I don't know how to use, but I think it's pretty simple. We just find the correct size. Oh, that was the correct size one that was on it. Maybe you set it up for me. Thread it on there, put our freeze plug on like that, and then hammer it into the block. How hard can it be? Now I'm gonna put a little bit of RTV around the edge. Some people say to, some people say not to. I'm just gonna do a light little bead.
I'm cleaning the edges of all the ports with emery cloth to smooth them out before using the tool and tapping each of the expansion plugs back in. On this side anyways. Then a while later, Steve brings home the greatest tool ever, the induction heater, to see if we can get the manifolds off the other heads, because these are the ones we're going to use on the motor we've been working on.
All right, so last night Steve was able to bring over that super induction heater tool, and surprisingly, it got every single bolt out of each exhaust manifold out. No issues at all. It's incredible what that tool can do. And in hindsight, I should have just waited to use that tool to get all of these out, because then it would have saved me literally like a week of work. But at least the last one that's broken, that one wasn't my fault. That was already broken in there when I got the car, so that makes me feel a little better about it.
There's some accessories on the motor that still need paint.
I always keep a roll of aluminum foil in the garage when I need to tape stuff up that's at like odd angles. This stuff works great, and I even reuse it because I'm poor.
In between coats of paint on the distributor cap, I'll give the engine bay a final scuff to get it ready for paint. Then put the first coat of color on the distributor cap, followed by a final wipe down and masking of the engine bay.
All right, I've got everything taped up here, ready to go. All the important stuff that's not getting black. Ooh, I actually forgot about those decals. I'm gonna tape these off because I love that it still has factory decals on it, but everything else is taped off, which means we can now paint this.
2 light coats of flat black is all I'm gonna do in here. And then it's done.
Engine bay is done. Last coat's on. It's looking good. That looks so shiny because it's not dry yet. Exactly as I envisioned. I knew it wasn't going to be perfect. I didn't want to strip this down, all the bare metal and all that. This was just a quick way of making it look improved over what it was.
Later that night, Steve comes by to make our final attempt at removing the last broken manifold bolt. If he can get this last one out, I might actually cry. He's also running a tap through the other bolt hole that was drilled out incorrectly by whoever the previous owner was. Remember this one, which ended up having a broken easy out bit in there? And then, I couldn't record because I was holding the motor, Steve was able to finally drill out the final off-center mangled broken bolt. A true legend. I don't think I've ever felt so happy with clothes on. He even saved the threads, and we tested it with a bolt. And all of this, these days and days worth of trying, was because of this.
This little, looks like it's a easy out that was broken off inside of there. This has sucked so bad, but it's finally done. I don't know what I would do without Steve and my dad.
The answer is, I probably wouldn't be able to do any of this. I've learned so much over the past year, taking on these projects that are so much larger than I've ever done. But I've learned more this year from my dad and neighbor Steve than probably every year before combined. And that's why I'm doing this whole project for my dad in the first place. Stay tuned for the next video where I'll try to get this motor back in more smoothly than it came out and have it done so Dad can finally take a drive before it gets to be winter. And we are cutting it close. See you guys next time. Happy motoring.